Well, good evening, everybody. Where do you think I am? Well, Rachel Reeves, I think your speech to your party conference tomorrow is going to be a complete car crash. Not only with your own MPs who are demanding you create a black hole bigger than the one on Diane Abbott's calculator, but also with the public who you've rated as, well, they've rated you as the most unpopular Chancellor in history. So I thought I'd write your speech for you. And let's get started, shall we? Well, good afternoon, comrades. Today, I want to be honest with the British people. Something Labour hasn't managed to do in decades. We're broke. Not tightening the belt broke, I mean bankrupt broke, spiritually, economically and institutionally. But instead of asking the working man to cough up more, we're going to cut the rot. Not tinker at the edges, slash it at the source. That's what we're going to do. So here's the new plan. Well, brace yourself, comrades, because this might hurt a little bit. First up, foreign aid. Well, we're scrapping it. Not reducing it, scrapping it. That's £12 billion a year saved. Why are we borrowing billions of pounds to send to countries that hate us? Well, not anymore, because charity begins at home, doesn't it, comrades? Second, benefits for foreign nationals who haven't lived in Britain for 10 years. Now, that's gone. You don't contribute, you don't collect. That's at least £4 billion a year once we stop welfare tourism. Well, third, asylum seekers. Well, you want asylum? Fine. You'll get a flight straight home. No more free hotels. No more legal aid for those who broke into our country. We will replace the £4 billion asylum industry with a single line item: deportation flights. Now, the bloated civil service. I can hear cries across the audience. Every DEI department, well, the programmes that have become taxpayer-funded hate machines, well, they're in the bin. Net zero? Well, that's finished too. We're not shutting down steelworks and bankrupting families just to hit a target scribbled down by some bloke in Davos. We're also reopening the North Sea. Drill, baby, drill. That's roughly £8.6 billion a year. And what about those massive gas reserves we found that we said we wouldn't touch? We're starting digging tomorrow. That one field alone could heat up to thousands of homes for the next 50 years. Oh, quick, someone's passed out. Oh, it looks like... Oh, it's Ed Miliband's. Can someone get the paramedics in, please? Just give him a hand over there. Oh, yes, and civil service pensions. We'll cap them, claw back and close the loopholes. No more gold-plated Disney retirements while the private sector is being asked to work well into their 70s. We'll also scrap quangos, trash half the advisory boards and make every department justify itself pound by pound. That's tens of billions of pounds saved. And David Lammy, I've been looking at your receipts. No more spending 500 grand on restaurants and bars. You're getting a preloaded Nando's card, mate, worth 100 quid. Use it wisely. Oh, and the death tax. Well, that's gone. Why should the government tax you for what your parents broke their backs to pass on to you? Gone. Scrapped. And what are we doing with all this new money we've just created? Well, we're cutting business rates so the high street can breathe again. We're ending the capital gains taxes that scared off 16,500 millionaires who pay nearly 70 billion in income tax. We want them back so we can start lowering income tax for everyone else by the next budget. And what about the rest of it? Well, we're paying off the astronomical debt we, this government, have accumulated. And if we don't pay that off now, we are doomed. We're dooming you and your children in the future. Well, here's the truth. For years, both parties of both colours have fed the parasite of government while punishing you for our bloated miscalculations. Well, not anymore. To sum it all up, for those of you in the room who struggle with numbers, Diane, I can see you sitting over there, we're putting Britain first, saving billions and cutting the bloat. We're rebuilding this country with people who want to work, want to build and want to be proud again. That's not far right. That's not racist. It's common sense and basic economics. And look, if Labour can't say it, let's face it, someone in the next government will.
As a journalist, I always need to remember more in less time. And you know what I really hate? Taking notes. It wastes loads of time and you forget stuff. And that's where Plord comes in. This is the Plord Note, a sleek, pro-level AI note-taker that records and creates notes for you. Whether you're listening to a long podcast, stuck in a meeting, or on an important call, Plord captures everything at the tap of a button. Then it gives you a smart, structured summary with all of the key takeaways. It even recognises different speakers by their voice, and you can choose from bullet points, to-do lists, or even mind maps. Your data's safe too, with end-to-end encryption and global privacy compliance. And with Plord's built-in AI, you can search everything you've ever recorded just by asking a question. It's slim, magnetic, under 30 grams, lasts up to 60 days on standby, and over 1 million people are already using it. Hit the link in the description and use code GB10 for £10 off your Plord order. Save hours of time and never miss a detail again. Link in the description below.
But let's get the thoughts of my panel, shall we? Political commentator Chloe Dobbs, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Well, thank you very much for joining me at this lovely conference this evening. Matthew, so glad you could make Labour Party conference this
Thank
year.
you for inviting me. It's my first ever Labour Party conference.
Is it really? Well, that should be quite interesting news for our audience. Matthew, I'll of course start with you. Look, obviously, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I'm having a little bit of fun with it. But I think the public have a feeling across the country there's a massive economic pull on their wallets. They see the government making ideological decisions, I believe, when they look at things like the carbon capture plant, for example, unproven science, some may suggest. They want sensible economics. We're sitting on North Sea oil. We're sitting on this massive gas field, for example. These sorts of things the British public are saying, actually, while we're in this massive economic crisis, we should be doing those things. What do you think the Chancellor should do?
So I think you did a reasonable job in terms of your performance. A little bit of work, perhaps. Not easy to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. I certainly wouldn't want to be Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I do feel for Rachel Reeves, because although she obviously does want to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, this is a very difficult country to be managing at the moment, not least if you are in number 11. I could go on for a very long time. So are there 2 or 3 of your policies that you see as your priorities that you'd like me specifically to? Well,
I think if we've got to scrap net zero, I think that's the big one. We've got to save billions.
OK, let's take the North Sea. So what you neglected to say is that we are an island, so we have a lot of sea around us by definition, and we have a lot of wind. We don't have that much sunshine, unfortunately. So I think it's probably common sense to be exploiting our wind, to be exploiting our waves and moving quickly towards energy independence, because I don't want Putin's boot anywhere near the British neck.
OK, all right. Well, Chloe, what do you make of it? Well, I mean, look, I think many people at home are bracing themselves economically, bracing themselves for another tax increase later this year. And what's the autumn budget? It's basically a winter budget at that point. It's from the end of basically December. What should the Chancellor do? What is going to regain confidence of the British people in this government?
Well, I think you definitely had some good ideas in your speech there. I would say it's very bold of you to wear that far-right tie in front of the Labour Party members with those Union Jacks on.
You want to reclaim it?
But look, I think you're right that we need to go through pound by pound. Zia Yusuf, he said, he's a businessman. When you've got a failing business, what you do is you go through their balance sheet pound by pound and get rid of anything whilst you're in that crisis mode that is not absolutely essential. Surely things like foreign aid are the first to go. And I think if you look at a graph of the UK's energy prices compared to other countries, ours is just way up there. How on earth can we be a competitive nation without low energy prices? Now, I'm not completely on side of Trump where he thinks windmills are a disaster and we shouldn't bother with them at all. I do think that we should invest in renewable energy, but I don't think that we should be blocking new exploration in the North Sea when we've got that there. And speaking of reliance on Putin, I mean, Trump is currently saying to European nations, please stop buying oil from Russia. If we were living in this perfect utopian world where we could right now 100% rely on wave energy, solar energy, wind energy, then great. But we're nowhere near that. So we need to be using that oil in the North Sea so we don't have to be buying it from Putin.
Absolutely. Adam, the other thing I want to do is scrap things like foreign aid. I think when we're asking the British taxpayer to cough up more and then we send billions of pounds abroad every year to countries times, and I appreciate this is a political and diplomatic tool we use, but there are times when you have to say we need to prioritise Britain.
Look, I don't think everyone in this country knows that we send billions abroad to countries that have space programmes and have nuclear weapons programmes. Now, if they can afford that for their people, they can afford to feed them and improve their infrastructure. That is not for the likes of us four to contribute to something like that in Pakistan or one of these countries. We're giving money away when we have our own homeless. Our schools are failing, our NHS is failing. But one thing I would like to, if I could ever sit down in a room with Rachel Reeves, is say you need to stimulate this economy. I'm a small businessman. I'm not an economist. I don't know how a country runs, but the country is effectively one big business. We need to stimulate people to spend money in your business. Now, for me, if they was to, we're hearing rumours of a VAT hike. Now, that would be disastrous. We need to cut VAT. In many European countries and abroad, the VAT rate is half that of ours, and that is to stimulate hospitality and stimulate tourism. I mean, her budget last time, the national insurance contributions rise, has decimated hospitality. My industry. I mean, I think we've lost 110,000 jobs since that budget. And growth and companies going bust are at record levels. It's just dire.
And millionaires leaving the country as well.
Yeah.
You know, and Matthew, one of the problems I have with millionaires leaving the country is that they pay so much tax for us. And when we lose that tax income, who pays for it? The rest of us have to.
Yeah, so you've got to be aware, if you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer or Prime Minister, of unintended consequences. Millionaires will come and go. If it turns out that so many millionaires have left, that has a net detrimental impact on the economy, then obviously, and I don't know whether that's the case or not, obviously you have to look again. You can see why they want to tax the super wealthy, because as we all know, there are people up and down this country in their millions, I would suggest the many millions, who are really struggling to make ends meet. And I take Adam's point about the impact of that national insurance rise on the hospitality industry. It's an industry, of course, that Adam knows well. The difficulty facing this government when it came into power was the economy was not in brilliant shape. I don't think it's been in brilliant shape since the financial crisis. That's point one. But also public services that all of us use, that I used for my 3-year-old on Friday night, and that we all, if we don't have private health, I don't have private health, we all rely on, many, many millions of us, they were in poor shape as well. So it's a really difficult balancing act, and the government's got to be incredibly careful, A, about how it taxes, B, about who it taxes, and C, to avoid unintended consequences. Yeah, Chloe, because the tax burden is at all-time highs, and we have to blame the Tories for this as well. They started the trend of rising our taxes beyond belief. It's eye-watering now that we might be staring down the barrel eventually of more income taxes if the government cannot get the budget under control. If inflation gets higher, for example, we will have to have an income tax raise at some point, because where else can the government go? What do you make of what's happening to farmers as well? Farmers, they're out protesting at Labour Party conference today. They've up with their tractors. They're clearly very, very unhappy, and they've been unhappy since this new inheritance tax has come in. What do you think we should be doing to help them?
Well, I don't think that the inheritance tax raid on farmers made any sense. Same for the decision they initially made on the winter fuel payment. These things, just for me, I don't see how on earth they thought these were going to go down well. They weren't big revenue raisers. So, I mean, the cut in winter fuel was meant to only save about 1.5 billion. I mean, you've just been talking about 12 billion in foreign aid that we could get rid of. The farmers' tax, I think that was expected to only raise about 500 grand a year. This is a very small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. For how it's harmed their reputation horrendously, for something that was clearly an ideological policy. Things like also the tax raid on private schools, again, seem very ideological and not very practical. I think they've got to be a lot more practical. Another thing I think they need to do is they need to be realistic and good at managing expectations. Matthew's pointed out they came in with the NHS on its knees, a lot of public services and whatnot really needing investment and help. But if we spend first and try to grow the economy later, that just doesn't work. They needed to really come in and say, look, we're going to have to be really tight on our budgets whilst we get the economy stimulated. That will then get tax receipts up as the GDP grows, and then we'll start investing in these things. Yeah. There's no no easy answer, but we're in this tax spend doom loop that just goes on and on.
Didn't we? At the beginning of that coalition, or during that coalition, we had really, really tough, crunching austerity, and that had a major impact on our public services. So if Labour had come in and said, OK, we're not putting more money into the NHS, you know, my father-in-law, who was languishing on a waiting list for a very long time, you cannot get an economy growing if you have a sick population. And also, I think government has a responsibility, first, of course, to defence, and also to our health and our education. And I can understand your point. It's a perfectly reasonable debate to be had, which comes first. But I have some sympathy for this government in wanting to put a cash injection.
But they're not cash injections. That's absolute nonsense. They're trying to claw back 500 million a year from farmers from an inheritance tax that they was protected for decades for good reason, and yet we give 500 million every year to foreign farmers as part of aid. That makes zero sense. We are taxing the people that feed us, and that is only a bad thing.
It's absolute nonsense that the government did a cash injection into the NHS and into public services.
But I'm saying the farmers' policy doesn't raise money.
True.
The private school policy will not earn money.
Can I just clarify? Because yes, they did put more money into the NHS. However, the problem the NHS has got is it's an ever bigger black hole. It keeps getting bigger. And we look at the amount of appointments delivered. Wes Streeting did celebrate the amount of appointments delivered, but it's less than what Rishi Sunak was able to deliver in his final year in government. So the question really is how much is that good? How much good is it actually doing? Because it doesn't seem like it's doing enough.
It's a bottomless pit.
It is a bottomless pit.
That sounds like an argument to spend less and less. And I can tell you from personal experience. Let me just make the point. I can tell you from personal experience, sometimes the NHS is not particularly good. This weekend, when my child was wheezing, it was unbelievably good. And I want that to be the experience of everyone in this country.
But it isn't, Matthew.
I can promise you, it isn't. And the idea that putting less money into it, because you think it is a bottomless pit, is going to make our children safer, to use your phrase back at you, is absolute nonsense. That doesn't mean that there isn't room for it to be better managed. But I can tell you one thing. You spend less money on our NHS and we all suffer.
But one thing I'd like to say to Rachel Reeves, if they're watching this programme, you cannot collect taxes from shuttered businesses. You cannot collect taxes from people that are not in work. That is fundamental, of economics. You cannot do that, and that's what they're causing. They're causing thousands of businesses to shut, and they're causing hundreds of thousands of people to lose their jobs. How is that sensible? It makes no sense to the average man or woman.
Yeah, listen, I think this is the difficulty. She's the most unpopular Chancellor in history, now on record at least. And when we just very, very briefly on the point about the NHS, I don't want us to spend less money on the NHS. I want us to spend the money better. The regulations, the red tape, all this stuff has got to go. We do need to look at ways to manage the NHS.
But that's what Wes Streeting says he is trying to do.
Well, let's hope they get there. I really do, because I want the NHS to be successful for all of us. Our lives literally depend on it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed a little bit of tongue-in-cheek there about the potential speech from Rachel Reeves tomorrow. I suspect it'll be a lot less liked by many of you at home. But there we go.